Hi, I'm Kristen, and today I'll be talking about an interaction that I had with a wraith or succubus-like entity. So back in 2015, I was living in Tennessee, and one particular night I was having what I thought was a dream. So in this dream, I was laying flat on my back in my bedroom, and I was seeing my room as it normally is. So it looked exactly as it does in real life. I could see the door to my bedroom, I could see the window to my left-hand side. Just everything looked exactly as it does in real life. And so when I woke up, I suppose, within this dream, I felt like I was waking up in real life, but I hadn't. And what I immediately saw was something floating over me slightly to my left. So a few inches above me, there appeared to be a woman. And this woman, she was completely cloaked in black linen fabric. And the first thing that caught my eye was the end of her dress. And so I couldn't see her feet, but I saw this almost voluminous, but kind of large, moving dress that was just completely smooth. It didn't have any adornments on it or anything like that. But the way that the dress moved at the bottom was kind of like moving underwater, like swaying a bit. I At the time I didn't realize I was dreaming, but I had this kind of feeling of being in awe. And so, while a normal person might think seeing something hovering over them is horrifying and scary, wearing this again long black dress, and it also had like a small like hood that went over it. My immediate reaction was like, "Oh, this is beautiful. This is interesting. This is um, curious, I suppose." And at that time in my life, I had been involved in the spiritualist community for many years. And so I had only left the church shortly before I had moved out of state. And so at that time, thinking that I was awake and that I was kind of looking at this ghost over me, I didn't think it was scary or terrifying at all. I just thought it was quite pretty. And I couldn't get a good look at the face of this woman who was over me, but she had her arms up and kind of like up over near the top of my chest, and she had very long, thick black hair that was kind of a little bit wavy. And again, she had like this kind of again like some semi-transparent black linen kind of hood that was over it, so I couldn't clearly see her face, but I could clearly see her wrist and her hand that were kind of sticking out of the end of her sleeve. And so her sleeve was kind of like a big bell sleeve that was kind of hanging down. And so even her sleeve as well kind of like had this kind of like kind of rippling water motion to it. And I remember in this state of awe, not really trying to look at her face, but I was trying to touch her clothing. Just because of the way that it was moving, it just seemed very ethereal and otherworldly. It didn't seem like the way that actual fabric would move in real life. And so, in this dream or this astral projection that I was having, I vividly remember raising up my hands and touching the sleeve of this being. And I remember feeling the fabric, and it was hard, and it was almost felt like starchy when you put too much starch onto a piece of fabric that you're going to iron. And it was thick, and I could feel like underneath my fingertips this feeling of like the weave of the linen. So I could see that it was linen, but I could very clearly like feel like every thread as I was touching it. And so as I was touching this woman's or this being's dress, she didn't seem to move at all. It was just still like just like kind of like this like mildly moving, floating, like completely horizontal over the top of my body. And I probably had a couple seconds of touching the sleeve, and then I woke up. And so at the time, I thought it was kind of like a very beautiful dream or a beautiful astral projection that I was having. I couldn't clearly see this woman, what this entity, whatever she was, her face, but her hands were quite thin. I would say emaciated, but it almost like looked like how a model's hands look. So her hands, like you could clearly see the tendons and her joints and everything like that, but it was in a very ethereal, thin, beautiful type of way that her hands looked. And so after I had that happen, Because it wasn't scary and there wasn't really anything that happened. It was just me touching a piece of fabric, this long black hooded dress. I didn't mention it to anybody. I just thought like that was a really strange and pretty dream, and I kind of went on about my day. And so my mother had been visiting my family at the time, and so that later that day after I had woken up, we decided to go out to a vineyard. And at that time, I wasn't particularly drinking. And I've never really liked wine, so I wasn't getting anything while we were there. So I was off on my own while the rest of my family was inside, like picking out which samples of wines that they wanted to sample. And when they had finished and they had come out of the building, they had like these little boxes of like little samplers. I saw my mother and my husband talking in the distance, and I started walking towards them. And when I came up on their conversation, I heard my husband saying to my mother, "Oh, I didn't want to tell her because I thought she would get afraid, or she would be scared, or something like that, something along those lines." And because I just heard the tail end of the conversation, I was like, who did you not want to say something to? And my husband and my mom kind of like exchanged glances back and forth, like again, like almost like this kind of feeling of like do we tell her? Are we going to mention right now like what we were just talking about? And my husband said that I saw something on you last night, and I was like, that's odd. Well, like, what did you see? And he proceeded to explain that he saw a woman hovering over me the night before. And obviously, I had this very clear memory of this what I considered beautiful woman that was hovering over me. And my husband went on to describe that he saw a woman straddling me. And so that's not what I saw when I had this kind of dream projection image in my mind, or what I had actually seen, like possibly with like my astral body or my soul. He told me that he saw this woman with both of her legs on both sides of me, almost like with her thighs kind of like wrapped around my lower ribs or upper stomach, and she was completely full on just leaning over my face. And he said that he saw her mouth open, and it was almost like he said like from Harry Potter, like the wraiths that you see, like, or the Death Eaters, where they start sucking the soul out through the person. He said it seemed like this woman had been like trying to suck something out of me when he saw her. And again, he described her as wearing all black, and he described her as having like thick black or very dark hair. But again, because he saw her from the side when he was on the other side of the bed, he couldn't get a good look at her face either. He just kind of saw this outline or silhouette of her face, like kind of sucking. And so that was pretty scary to hear in the moment that I didn't get a look at her face. Like based on like where her arms and her hands were when I saw her, I didn't clearly look at her head, but it seemed like it was slightly down into the left side of my own. But he saw her completely aligned with my own. And so just thinking about it, I have kind of come to the conclusion that it was probably what we consider a succubus. It's something that kind of takes your life force or is trying to gain energy from you. I just find it very interesting that usually when you hear other experiencers talking about meeting these types of beings or entities, that they describe the woman on top of them as looking like a hag or looking very ugly, just being completely horrifying. And my immediate reaction was like, oh, like there's a visitor in the room and she's really pretty, and it's like I don't mind her being here. And just waking up from that dream, it wasn't a nightmare or that astral projection. It wasn't scary. It was just something that happened, and I was completely fine with it. Until I heard my husband's story and found out that she would seem to be taking something from me. So thankfully, I haven't had anything like that happen again. But I am curious of if it did happen again, if I would be afraid the second time around, or if I would have that same kind of reaction of awe and this feeling of I want to know more. I want to know like what this being is, who she is, where she came from, what is her life on whatever dimension or space that she lives in. What does that look like? I mean, I have so many questions about how these types of entities kind of exist. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So if you've ever had an interaction with like one of these types of entities that kind of like looks wraith-like in long types of robes, or a succubus that like very clearly is trying to kind of get into your energy and into your space, I'd love to hear about it. So thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.